Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, especially in the areas of mitigation, adaptation, and means of implementation. They vowed to take action, urgent action, to halt and to reverse biodiversity loss, including by ensuring the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from genetic resource use. And importantly, they acknowledge the serious threats posed by plastic, air and chemical pollution, expressing firm support for an internationally, legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. This is groundbreaking work that is already underway and making history here in Nairobi. As the world's Parliament on the Environment, the United Nations Environment Assembly is supremely well placed to advance these priorities and to bring about the tangible, integrated results we urgently need across the sustainable development continuum. As the international community, we must move the dial, because the current trajectory is not ideal, to say the least. The global temperature has risen 1.5 degrees over a 12-month period, for the first time on record. Plastic particulates have been found in every ecosystem on the planet. As UNEP and others conducting research have long warned, if we do nothing, the volume of plastic production will continue to spiral out of control, and by 2050 there will be more plastic in the oceans than fish. And biodiversity is degrading at the fastest rate in history, while air, water, and land pollution are causing 9 million premature deaths each year. I repeat, 9 million premature deaths each year. Given that we are confronting an environmental emergency and the consequential need to act with urgency, we must ensure that the outcome of this UNEA-6 advances the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, that it promotes truly multilateral responses to restore the balance with nature, and that the UNEA-6 outcomes bring about a future that is more equitable, inclusive, and resilient for all peoples everywhere. As President of the General Assembly, I proudly embrace my duty to maximize convergence, to create spaces for constructive dialogue, and to encourage member states and stakeholders alike to work shoulder to shoulder in advancing balanced progress. There are several prime opportunities on the horizon. The third UN Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries and the fourth International Conference on Small Island Developing States are pivotal occasions to support countries that have contributed the least, but are disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change and biodiversity loss. In addition, the General Assembly will convene in an inaugural Sustainability Week from 15th to 19th April at United Nations headquarters in New York. The high-level gathering, a cornerstone shared future we want. To that end, I encourage all member states to participate at the highest possible levels. Equally, I wholeheartedly applaud UNEA-6 aims to amplify the Summit of the Future and its anticipated outcome, the Pact of the Future, through its ministerial declaration to be adopted this week. I have no doubt that this will be an invaluable input for the summit, as world leaders will gather in New York in September to seek to revitalize multilateral cooperation and forge a new global consensus on how to deliver better for people and planet. In all these endeavors, let us be clear that we are called to action in the service of, quote unquote, we the peoples, especially all those who have been underserved and at highest risk of being further left behind, the LDCs, the LLDCs, and the SIDS, and those underrepresented at the negotiation table to advocate for better solutions. That is, women, children, indigenous peoples, persons belonging to minority groups, and other vulnerable communities. Translating commitments into meaningful change means stepping up implementation of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda by significantly scaling up finances for sustainable development and providing the means of implementation to developing countries. It means forging the strong and diverse partnerships that will be essential for our success. And it means mobilizing and allocating the financial and technological support to implement sustainable and environmentally sound solutions. Without being overly optimistic, and as we chart the path ahead, let me conclude with a quote from Maurice Strong, UNEP's first executive director and pioneer of global sustainable development, who once said that, and I quote, "I am convinced the prophets of doom have to be taken seriously. I'm equally convinced with the desired unity of purpose that we can and must usher in a new era of planetary stewardship, one that catalyzes action across multiple fronts to bring about peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all, everywhere. I stand ready to mobilize the General Assembly to that end. Yes, we are facing formidable challenges, but I firmly believe that we can overcome the deepening geopolitical tensions, acting in unison and laser-focused in our ambition. We stand a better chance to succeed in overcoming the myriad of challenges we are up against. I thank you.
Thank you very much to the President of the General Assembly for these statements. I am pleased now to invite Her Excellency Paula Narvaez, President of the Economic and Social Council, to address the Environment Assembly.
Su Excelencia, señor Presidente, Dr. William de Kenia, Dr. William Ruto, Su Excelencia, Presidente de la Asamblea General, señor Denis Francis, Directora Ejecutiva de UNEP, señora Inga Andersen, señora Presidenta de la UNEA-6, señora Leila Bendy, señoras y señores autoridades del Sistema de las Naciones Unidas, señores y señoras ministras, señores y señores jefes de Estado, excelencias, distinguidos invitados e invitadas. Es un verdadero placer sumarme a ustedes en esta fecha, en el 6º periodo de sesiones de la Asamblea de las Naciones Unidas sobre el medio ambiente. Mientras estamos reunidos, el mundo se enfrenta a retos sin precedentes que exigen una acción urgente y colectiva. El tema del 6º periodo de sesiones de esta Asamblea, medidas multilaterales eficaces, integradoras y sostenibles para hacer frente al cambio climático, la pérdida de biodiversidad y la contaminación, subraya la magnitud de las crisis a las que nos enfrentamos y la necesidad imperiosa de adoptar medidas decisivas para hacerles frente. La triple crisis planetaria del cambio climático, la pérdida de biodiversidad y la contaminación constituye una amenaza para el núcleo esencial de la existencia. Las cifras son elocuentes. 1.300 millones de personas corren el riesgo de sufrir los efectos del cambio climático y 1 millón de especies se enfrentan a la extinción debido a las actividades humanas. La contaminación en sus diversas formas se cobra la vida de 9 millones de personas al año. Tras alcanzar el punto medio de nuestra Agenda 2030, nos enfrentamos a una disyuntiva crítica. Lo sabemos, los objetivos que nos proponemos son ambiciosos, pero también sabemos que son alcanzables. Sin embargo, el progreso se realiza a un ritmo que es insuficiente y los retos que nos aguardan son de enormes proporciones. En cifras, el 50% de las metas de los ODS no han avanzado lo suficiente. La mitad, estamos diciendo. El 30% se han estancado o han retrocedido y el 15% definitivamente no van por buen camino. Los resultados de la cumbre sobre los ODS del 2023 dejaron en claro que aunque se han logrado avances, falta muchísimo para que alcancemos los objetivos al 2030. Por eso debemos reconocer que los objetivos están interconectados y que es necesario actuar con sinergias. No podemos permitirnos abordar estos retos de forma aislada. Deben enfrentarse de forma holística, intentando alcanzar una comprensión global de sus interrelaciones, no más fragmentaciones. Hay muchos ejemplos que subrayan la necesidad urgente de adoptar enfoques coordinados e integrados, como demuestra el reciente informe publicado por el Departamento de Asuntos Económicos y Sociales y la Convención Marco sobre el Cambio Climático. En este informe se destacan algunos datos importantes que justifican estas sinergias. Por ejemplo, hay pruebas que vinculan a la acción para el clima con el 80% de los objetivos de la Agenda 2030, lo que ofrece oportunidades para políticas integradas y efectivas. Los beneficios colaterales para la salud y la agricultura pueden compensar los costos de las políticas climáticas e impulsar el Producto Interno Bruto mundial. Es decir, hay oportunidades. Las políticas climáticas eficaces pueden reducir el costo de lograr el acceso universal a la electricidad en el África subsahariana. Y alinear las iniciativas climáticas y los ODS podría dar lugar a un aumento impactante de 43 billones de dólares en la producción económica para el 2070. Los beneficios de estos planteamientos integrados son innegables, pero será necesario adoptar nuestras políticas y acciones de manera deliberada, y creo que esto es posible. Distinguidas delegadas, distinguidos delegados, hemos comenzado ya los preparativos para convocar al Foro Político de Alto Nivel sobre Desarrollo Sostenible del 2024 bajo los auspicios del Consejo Económico y Social de las Naciones Unidas en el mes de julio. Ello justo después de los resultados de la cumbre de los ODS del 2023 y de este sexto periodo de sesiones de la Asamblea de las Naciones Unidas sobre Medio Ambiente. Los resultados de esta asamblea se incorporarán a las deliberaciones del Foro Político de Alto Nivel y sin duda supondrán una importante contribución a la labor del Consejo, en particular por su examen al Objetivo de Desarrollo Sostenible número 13, relativo a la acción climática, pero sin perder de vista la interacción con los demás objetivos bajo revisión, el 1 sobre pobreza, el 2 sobre hambre y seguridad alimentaria y el 16 sobre instituciones sólidas. Al iniciar nuestras deliberaciones en este periodo de sesiones, reafirmemos nuestro compromiso con las acciones multilaterales eficaces, como aquí se ha dicho, inclusivas y sostenibles. Aprovechamos esta oportunidad para redoblar las ambiciones de lograr un resultado significativo, forjar nuevas alianzas, movilizar recursos y catalizar un cambio transformador. El mundo nos está mirando y pide resultados y soluciones. Ofrezco el Consejo Económico y Social como una plataforma de trabajo integrada que permita avanzar hacia políticas significativas y eficaces y hacer del desarrollo sostenible una verdadera realidad. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a la señora Presidenta del Consejo Económico y Social. At this stage, I invite the Assembly to view a video message of His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, who was unable to join us in person.
President Ruto, dear leaders, excellencies, friends, thank you for coming together at this important assembly to tackle the environmental crisis we face. Your efforts are urgent. Our planet is on the brink. Ecosystems are collapsing. Our climate is imploding. And humanity is to blame. The fallout from poisoned rivers to rising seas harm us all. Yet, those least responsible suffer most, a burning injustice. We must work together to combat this crisis, recognizing the links between them, to put the world on a sustainable path and turbocharge sustainable development. That means taking urgent action to accelerate a just transition from fossil fuels to renewables, to adapt to extreme weather, deliver climate justice, get a grip on pollution, protect and restore ecosystems, and drive progress towards the other targets in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Countries must set national targets to deliver that framework. They must capitalize the new Loss and Damage Fund, and they must create new economy-wide nationally determined contributions by 2025 that align with limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Together, we need governments to deliver a new treaty on plastic pollution and to massively increase finance for sustainable development and for climate and biodiversity action in developing countries. I urge countries to deliver our proposed SDG stimulus. And all commitments made by developed countries must be met. We must also ensure that production and trade of those minerals critical to the renewables revolution is sustainable and provides maximum benefit to developing countries. The United Nations panel on critical energy transition minerals will support these efforts. This assembly plays a vital role in driving environmental action. And you have shown before that you can unite and deliver, most recently with your historic decision to negotiate a plastic treaty. I urge you to do so again and go further. There are many important resolutions before you, so please take this chance to drive multilateral solutions. Let's see the Nairobi spirit deliver once again. Thank you.
Thank you to His Excellency the Secretary General for his good wishes for this session. It's now my pleasure to invite Mrs. Inger Anderson, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, to address the Assembly.
Your Excellency William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Excellencies here gathered to the UNEA, Excellency Denis Francis, President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, Excellency Paula Narvaez, President of ECOSOC, ministers, ambassadors, delegates, partners and friends, activists, welcome to Nairobi. Special welcome, of course, to my colleagues from the United Nations. It's a pleasure to see you all here from other agencies. Welcome to this high-level opening of the 6th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly here in beautiful Nairobi, our home, the environmental capital of the world, as we like to call it. My thanks to you, President Ruto, for continuing to strengthen Kenya's commitment to UNEP and indeed to global environmental action. Excellencies, we are here because the environmental crises facing the world are spreading and intensifying. We are living in an age of a climate emergency, and the warning lights on the planetary dashboard are glowing red hot. We are living in an age of withering nature, of dying lands and vanishing species. We're living in an age of a planet and people poisoned by chemicals and plastic, by waste and pollution of all kinds. Our high carbon, resource-hungry growth has sent some planetary systems teetering on the edge of the tipping points. Once these systems fail, they may not rise again, and humanity itself might also find itself flawed. But we cannot and must not despair, because the power of change lies with us, with you, with the members of this assembly, the governments they represent and who make up the wider UNEA and the UNEP family, from the multilateral environmental agreements to the scientists, from civil society to youth, from indigenous people to businesses and financiers who know that they must do things differently. We, this big global family, must stand together and push back against that triple planetary crisis, the crisis of climate change, the crisis of nature and land loss, and the crisis of pollution and waste, to create space for the climate to stabilize, for nature to recover, and for us to deal with pollution, and in so doing, providing the basis for our economies and our societies to flourish, and to flourish sustainably. We must push back against this crisis in lockstep to create space for those who follow, and in so doing, creating intergenerational equity and helping youth go stronger and wiser than those who went before them did. Excellencies, we cannot push back with the force required if we are divided. True strength comes from unity. So I ask this assembly, as the Secretary General just did, to do what it does best. I ask this assembly to put aside national and regional differences and remember that we live on this one little blue planet called Earth. Think of the planetary cycles, not electoral cycles. Think long-term. Look beyond the horizon. Remember that if my air is dirty, if my climate is changing, if my shores are awash with plastic, yours are too. If we stand together, or we will either stand together or we will fall together. That is inclusive multilateralism. So I ask this assembly to once again show the Nairobi spirit, that spirit which we believe lives here on these rolling hills in Gigiri, that spirit that 2 years ago put us on a path to end plastic pollution. And I ask that you conclude the hard work that has gone on over the past weeks and months by passing the resolutions and decisions on the table in the strongest form possible, and to show the world that the Nairobi spirit is alive and well, and of course, once passed, to expeditiously implement them with determination. But I also ask you to recall that this assembly is more than just a set of resolutions or decisions. This is where the global community gathers to think and to dream bigger, to reimagine how we can work better and smarter and harder and faster together to hold the future that we want in our mind's eye and to make it happen. We saw that vision yesterday when the many multilateral environmental agreements that set the global guardrails on the environment came together here in Nairobi for the first time. It was a bit of a family reunion. They sought ways to lift each other up, to unite, and to become more than the sum of their parts. These agreements have already delivered many results. Let's recall some. Protecting the ozone layer. Many species and huge areas of land and sea protected. Slowed the rate of climate change. Raised the profile of desertification and land degradation action. Eliminated toxic substances dangerous to human and planetary health, and much, much more. made in UNEP. These MEAs are making massive progress wherever they are and really delivering on environmental multilateralism. If they can do, they are here, and by unifying their efforts and by following suit, we can make a much stronger future that we all want become reality. Excellencies, as I said, we are living in an age of intensifying environmental threats, but we are also living in an age of cascading commitments, hope, and action. The environmental movement, as embodied in this assembly, is bigger than ever, stronger than ever, more united than ever. We can push back against the triple planetary crisis if we show unity of purpose at this assembly and beyond. We can purpose to shun fossil fuels and look towards renewable energy sources, purpose to conserve and restore the natural world and our lands, which gives us life, purpose to keep harmful chemicals, pollution and waste out of our ecosystem, and yes, out of our bodies. This is our great task, the most important one we will ever undertake. Billions of people are depending on us to succeed. Let's not let them down. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your inspiring remarks, as usual, my dear Inga Andersen. And I wish to take this opportunity to thank the entire UNEP Secretariat for the tireless efforts, and the Deputy Executive Director, Mrs. Elizabeth Mrema, in leading the preparations of this session. I now have the pleasure to invite Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, Director General of the World Health Organization, to address the Assembly.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Jambo. Habari Salamu Kenya. Thank you. Your Excellency, President William Ruto, Your Excellency Dennis Francis, President of the UN General Assembly, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Honorable Minister Raila, President of the UN Environment Assembly, Excellency Paula Narvaez, President of ECOSOC, and my colleague and sister Executive Director Inga Andersen, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends. It's an honor to be here, and I thank Inga and UNEP for the invitation to address you today. The health of humans, animals, and our environment are woven together in a bond that's inextricable, yet fragile. This is not a new realization. The father of medicine, Hippocrates, said, "The physician treats, nature heals." We're now relearning what humans have always known, but which, since the Industrial Revolution, we have forgotten or ignored, that when we harm our environment, we harm ourselves. For centuries, we have plundered our planet in the name of progress. Now, we're paying the price with a triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. If our planet were a patient, it would be admitted to intensive care. Vital signs are alarming. It's running a fever, with each of the last 9 months the hottest on record. As we hurtle towards the 1.5 degree threshold, its lung capacity is compromised with the destruction of forests that absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. And many of the eldest water sources, its lifeblood, are contaminated. Most concerning of all, its condition is deteriorating rapidly. Is it any wonder then that human health is suffering when the health of the planet on which we depend is in peril? More frequent and severe weather events cause deaths and injuries, as you know, and damage to health facilities and other essential infrastructure. More heat waves contribute to more cardiovascular disease. Air pollution drives lung cancer, asthma, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Chemicals such as lead cause intellectual disability, cardiovascular, and kidney disease. And drought and water scarcity affect food production, making healthy diets less affordable. Meanwhile, climate change is leading to shifts in the behavior, distribution, movement, range, and intensity of mosquitoes, birds, and other animals that are spreading infectious diseases such as dengue and malaria to new areas. Illegal wildlife trading also increases the risk of zoonotic spillover that can trigger a pandemic, highlighting the importance of primary prevention to reduce risk. The threats to health from climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss are not hypothetical risks in the future. They're right here and right now, which makes health the most compelling reason for climate action. And yet, COP28 in Dubai last year was the first COP to include a day dedicated to health. And I would like to appreciate the leadership of the United Arab Emirates on this. The causes of this crisis are multi-sectoral. So too are its impacts, and so too must be our response. Collectively, we got ourselves into this mess. Collectively, we must get ourselves